Hello and welcome to another episode of Unmuted. I'm your host, Courtland Warren. This podcast is all about you finding your voice so that you can impact your life and your world. Let me start with this question. Have you ever stayed too long? Now you may be, stayed where? In a relationship, in a job, with an organization, in a prolonged habit. Have you ever stayed too long? Meaning you wore out the welcome, or more emphatically, there was a part of you that knew that what you were doing was not working, and yet you stuck with it. Was it stubbornness? Was it what you thought was resilience? Did you hang on because you just don't quit and you don't give in? And is there a difference between quitting and surrendering? And then how do you know those distinctions? That's what we'll cover in today's episode, really exploring the differences between quitting and also surrender. See, because they're related concepts, they're really related ideas, but they have different connotations depending on the context. So when we talk about quitting typically refers to voluntarily giving up or stopping an activity, okay? It implies a conscious decision to cease participating or pursuing something. Quitting can be seen as a personal choice, often driven by factors like lack of motivation or dissatisfaction or a desire to pursue other opportunities. And it can also carry a negative connotation, right? You quit because it got too hard, or you quit because it got too difficult. You quit because you saw that you weren't going to win, or you didn't get your way. And so sometimes what happens is, because people don't want to be described as that, or they don't want to be seen as a quitter, the tendency is, or can be, to hang on even long after you know that your ideal outcome isn't going to happen, that the goal that you desire to achieve isn't going to be accomplished in that particular vehicle. It's like going to work every day at a place that doesn't pay you what you're worth, and you know that that particular vehicle, that particular method will not get you there, but you stick with it. And we have all manner of reasons and justifications for why we stayed with it. We stayed because, I have children. I got a family to take care of. I have aging parents. I can't just quit my job. What do? I can't just quit. And so ultimately, or inevitably, we continue on a path and in a vehicle that we know will not get us to our desired destination. It's like being lost, knowing that you're going in the wrong direction, but continuing to drive that way. Have you ever truly thought about why we do that? It turns out that the reason that we do that, the reason why we stick with it too long, is based in this idea of scarcity. It is not commitment. It is not resilience. Particularly, notice this distinction, when we know that continuing that way will not get you what you want. So why do we hang on to it? We hang on to it ultimately because of scarcity, or a mindset that is geared towards scarcity. It's like being in a relationship with a person, and I've heard this a lot over the years, where you're in a person's in a relationship, the relationship is ending, and then one says to the other, well, you're never going to find anyone else like me. No one else is going to love you. No one else is going to care about you. No one else is going to be there for you the way that I have been. One, that's manipulative, and oftentimes people buy into that idea, and so they stay longer than they know is beyond reasonable. They stay long after they know that they're not going to get the outcome that they want, because of a fear that they won't find another relationship, or I won't find another job, or I won't find this opportunity again. And so let me just make this work. It would be the equivalent of literally watching a person beating their head against a brick wall, waiting for the building to crumble. beating their head against the wall, waiting for the building to crumble, like their forehead has started to bleed, right? But before that building crumbles, they'll pass out. Before that building crumbles, they'll actually die because they don't know the distinctions between quitting and surrender. And so we want to explore that, okay? Because surrender generally refers to yielding or giving up in the face of opposition or a stronger force. It's about knowing when you don't have the strength or the capacity to overcome what's in front of you. But when this happens, surrender doesn't mean I'm done forever. It means I'm done for now. Quitting, I'm gone for good. But when I surrender, it means essentially that I am not yet equipped to handle what's in front of me, and I'll be back. I will return. I've been using a lot of analogies from working out recently. And so I'll admit very vulnerably, transparently, I am not strong enough currently, okay, at least at that point in the workout, I was not strong enough to do a full pull-up, okay, a full pull-up, body weight pull-up, all right? And so my trainer's like, well, here's the deal. I want you to do it, go as far as you possibly can, okay? We just getting the muscles ready for next week or the week after when you will be doing them. He's like, you got to just get the body ready, like notify the muscles that this is something that you're going to be doing and we'll be returning shortly. And so we did a few different positions and I strained and I looked to pull myself up. I was not able to do it, but here's what I also knew. In that moment, I was not able to do it. What was required of my body physically, I was not in shape to do. I did not have the strength to do. But in the same vein, I got excited about the return because I was able to lock in. I was able to capture that moment because I know a week from now, 2 weeks from now, whatever it is, I'll at least be able to do a couple. Right. So it wasn't okay. So when I finally let myself go, I let myself off the bar. That was not quitting. That was surrender. It was the recognition that in that moment, what was required of me, that opposition was bigger, stronger, more difficult than I am prepared for. And I will return. I'm not there yet. Big difference between quitting and surrender. So surrendering as opposed to quitting can be seen as a beneficial, productive, conducive course of action in certain situations. That's what I want you to hear, all right, is that there are times when surrender can be viewed as conducive or beneficial, all right? And so, for example, sometimes it can be seen as beneficial, surrendering can be seen as beneficial when it comes to resolving conflicts. Okay, because surrender can actually help de-escalate a conflict and foster peace. Surrender can also be seen as beneficial when it's necessary to preserve a relationship, because surrendering can be a way to maintain or salvage the relationship, because sometimes letting go of a personal agenda or the need to be right can help build a bridge. I've often said, do you want to be right or do you want your relationship to work? Because sometimes you can't have both. So are you more committed to being right and having it your way? Or is it for you about really having the relationship? Do I want to be right? Or do you want to be right? Or do you want your relationship to work? Also, when it comes to learning and growth, surrendering can be very beneficial in that regard because surrendering can provide an opportunity for personal growth and self-reflection. It's like what I was just saying about, being there in the gym. It's like, okay, based on where I desire to be, I'm not there yet. And so there are some additional reps of other exercises, okay, that I need, that I'm excited about doing, because I now know that they will equip me for something that I want to do later. And then it is also important, right, to when it comes to surrendering, that you can use it. It is beneficial when you're prioritizing your well-being, because surrendering can be an act of self-care. Have you thought about that? It can be an act of self-care and prioritizing your well-being, like in situations where a continued pursuit of a goal or endeavor is causing excessive stress, burnout, and negatively impacting your mental or physical health. Surrendering can actually be necessary to protect yourself and focus on your well-being. It is also a way for you to embrace new opportunities. Okay, why? Because, well, here's the deal. By letting go of what is no longer serving you and what is holding you back, we actually open ourselves up to new possibilities and endeavors that may be more aligned with your values, your passions, and your goals. Okay, so when you get to that place where you're willing to let that go, or surrender to it, or perhaps it's now time to quit, right? Do so because what you want is beyond the place that you're currently giving up. That is a way to know and tell the difference. Okay, is if I quit and I go to something less, right? Well, okay, so if I stop, let's determine that we're at a place, okay, where I stop. If I return to something less than what I was just going after, I quit. But when I stop, if I still have my eyes or I still have my sights set on something beyond the place that just caused me to pause, that's surrender. So if I give up and I go to something less, something easier to attain, quitting. I pause and I'm just going to equip myself to go beyond the place where I've currently paused. That's more like surrender. And you got to know, it would be valuable to know the difference, right? Valuable to know the difference between the two, okay? So surrendering is oftentimes misunderstood, okay? It's misunderstood because it is sometimes viewed as a sign of weakness. And I make the case that in times, surrender is actually a display of great strength. In reality, it can be an act of great strength. And here's a few reasons why. One, surrender actually is a display of emotional intelligence, because surrendering requires a high level of said intelligence. It involves recognizing and accepting when one's own emotions, as well as the understanding those emotions and perspectives, okay? So surrendering requires you to be reflective enough to know what you're feeling and what you're experiencing, recognizing that a feeling is a conscious awareness of vibration. And so therefore, me being aware of how I'm vibrating or me being aware of my frequency is essentially evolved thinking, because I understand that my thoughts become things and my feelings dictate, my thoughts dictate what I'm feeling. So being aware of what I'm feeling is like being aware of what I'm thinking about, which is the whole point of being human, okay? That is a display of mastery. Not only that, but surrendering displays strength because it, as I just said, is a form of self-awareness. Okay, it is also a way of adaptability. Why? Surrendering can be a manifestation of adaptability and flexibility. It shows the strength to adjust to one's plans or strategy. Surrendering shows the ability to adjust to a plan or strategy. You can be stubborn about the goal, flexible in your approach. And so surrendering recognizes that, hey, I got to care about myself enough to know that I got to take care of myself in a way that dictates that I'll be able to see this thing through. It's one of the reasons why you want to take care of your physical body, is because you need your physical body to carry out instructions in this dimension. It's not enough to just think about it. It's not enough to just imagine it. We got to go into action. And yes, that requires a resilient mindset, but also a physical body that can maintain or sustain the energies necessary to create what it is that you want. Surrender is also is a sign of strength, because surrender requires courage. Surrender requires courage. Why? Because When I say I'm surrendering, that is the recognition that the opposing force right now is stronger than I am, but it will not continue to be that way. And so as I go out and as I go back and I prepare myself for the next time I meet this force, there's a courage that is required to meet the force again. There's a courage that is required to face a person who's defeated you before, or to face a scenario that you've been defeated by before. That is a requirement of courage. I don't know if he listens to the podcast, but I've made the acquaintance of a guy. His name is Chad, and so those of you who follow the podcast, you know that I really enjoy golf, and so my buddies, we have these majors every year. We have 4 or 5 majors, and so I set a goal. After getting beat in the last major of the year last year, so 2022, I get beat by 1 or 2 strokes by this guy named Chad. And Chad, he was just a better golfer. He was a better golfer that day. I mean, both days of the tournament, we were battling out. We were always a couple of shots within each other. And so he finally pulled away at the end. And after the round, I shook his hand. And it was the first time I'd played with him, but I shook his hand. I hugged him. It was this embrace because it was true competition. And for those that don't know, the real meaning of the word competition is to make better. And Chad did that. I knew that he was better than me then, but I wanted to taste victory. Okay, so when I hosted my tournament just last week, a couple of weeks ago, I sent a personal invite to Chad. Okay, now mind you, I've won all the majors this year in my golf group. Chad isn't a regular player in that group, but I reached out to him. I invited him to the tournament that I was hosting. I know it's a long story, but bear with me. I invited him to the tournament that I was hosting. I didn't play with him on the first day. I'm like, if we're both ready, we'll see each other in the final group on the final day. And as luck would have it, we met up in the final group on the final day. I was in the lead by a couple of shots. To make the long story shorter, I go on to win the tournament with Chad in the group. Chad finished second. Later, some of my buddies were like, man, you got to be kind of crazy to just like give a personal invite to the last person that beat you in the major. And I looked at him straight face. I said, 1, it's respect for Chad. And 2, I wanted to see if I had actually gotten better because I knew that he would be. See, that is a display of courage. Much easier not to invite him and say, well, I won. Okay. So but I knew that on that day he was better. And now it's like, okay, rubber meets the road. We meet again. I've been putting in work. I know you've been putting in work, and I've lost to this force before, but I believe I'm in a better position now. You can take that into your life, into your relationships, be they personal or professional. When you are defeated, do you go and prepare even stronger so that you can return? Then that's surrender. If you find that you never get back to face them, then it's likely that you quit. And there are times when surrender is actually what's required. So surrender is not weakness. It is not weakness. It can be a sign of strength. Why? Again, because 1, it shows emotional intelligence, self-awareness, adaptability, courage, and then also wisdom or discernment. You got to know when to say when. If you can learn when to say when, you can win more often. Why? Because you give yourself the opportunity to prepare for the next time that you find yourself up against that foe or that force. Staying too long in a situation can have several pitfalls. When you stay too long, it is at times, by staying in a situation that no longer serves you, such as a job or relationship, you risk becoming stagnant. That's one of the pitfalls of staying too long, is stagnation, because your growth stops. Why? Because you're not in an environment, you are not in an environment that is conducive to your expansion. You're not in an environment that is conducive to your growth. You're not being nurtured. You're not being watered. You're not being fed. And before you know it, you become like all of the death, essentially, that is around you. You're stagnant. There's no movement. There's no current. There's no currency. Am I communicating this? So when you do that, when you stay in an environment too long and you know that you can attest to the fact that you're not growing, that you're not expanding, you're dying on the vine because you stayed too long. Stagnation is one of the pitfalls of not knowing when to either quit or surrender. Also, obviously, your diminished happiness and fulfillment. See, the more you show up to that environment that you know doesn't support your growth and expansion, it's like confirming a belief about yourself that you're not worthy or not deserving. Every time you show up to that place, every time you show up to that relationship, and you know that your growth has stopped, what you essentially communicate to yourself is that you are not worthy or deserving of growth and expansion. And so, therefore, your happiness and your fulfillment pay an incredible price. You also, another one of the pitfalls is the lack of alignment in your personal values. Because there's a part of you that knows that you can be more, you can have more, you can do more, you can give more. It is in you to be great. It is in you to be extraordinary. You know that there's something more there, and yet whether it's the fear or the frustration, the stubbornness that has you continually show up to places where you're not being called upon to be your best self, where someone has settled for a lesser version of you, where someone has began to accept or to take on that this is the best that you can offer, it's the best that you can give, and yet you know that there's so much more to you. Your resentment starts to grow, your resentment starts to build, and then you're moving down the road of sabotage. Why? Because there's a lack of alignment. There's a lack of alignment. There's a lack of personal integrity, where what you say, what you feel, what you think, and what you believe all align. And when that's lost, now your self-image is diminished, and you will never act consistently in any way that is in conflict with your self-image. And so as a result of that, then you must take on that. So hear me. There are times when the force that you're up against, that opposing force, the opposition, is bigger than you, it's stronger than you right now. And so you got to go back and prepare. You got to go get stronger. I got to go get ready to do a pull-up. You with me? Okay, so something more is required, but you go back and you get the learning, but you set the date for when you're going to return. And when you return, it is not guaranteed that you will win, but it does display that you are willing to do what's required to have the courage to show up again. So much of success is your willingness to show up again and again and again and again. But you don't show up the same way. Now that's ridiculous. That's stubbornness. So you show up again and again and again and again. But every time you show up, every time you return, every time you come back better. You come back improved. You come back with some growth. You come back with some expansion. You come back with a new knowledge, a new understanding, a new way of being, acting. And you take it on. And when you do that, you win. And you conquer the fears. Sometimes it's necessary to quit, to walk away from it, to say that this environment does not support my growth. And no, I'm not returning to it. This is not where I am designed to be. Sometimes what's required is surrender. It's to know that that opposing force is stronger than you right now. But you're going to pause, not quit. You pause. And you go develop the capacity to move beyond that place that you just paused. Because by knowing when to say when, you actually set yourself up for more wins. I hope this helps. If it does, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast does exist, and we exist so that you can find your voice and therefore impact your world. We'd love for you to join our mailing list. If you got value from listening here, join our mailing list at info@courtlandwarren.com, info@courtlandwarren.com. Would love to have you get first-hand knowledge or notification around work that we're doing and value that we are bringing to the personal development marketplace. We appreciate you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.